My wife cheated while I paid for everything. A phone call that didn't hang up left me listening to 47 minutes of her with her lover. I went straight to the restaurant and exposed them both. I'm 27 years old. I work in it, and basically I'm the only one who brings money home. Or well, I used to be, because now all of that changed and I need to tell this story because I still can't believe this happened to me. Stephanie and I had been married for like 3 years. We lived in an apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was nice. And she stayed home because supposedly she was looking for work, something that according to her was super difficult in her field. And I, like an idiot, believed all of it this whole time. The thing is, I worked a lot, you know, long shifts in front of the computer, fixing system and network problems, that kind of stuff. And I'd come home tired, but I always tried to make things work between us. You know what I mean? I paid for everything. Literally everything. The rent, the food, her credit cards, the utilities, absolutely everything. And she just had to, I don't know, maintain the apartment and look for work, which apparently she never did seriously. Because there was always an excuse. It all started on a normal Tuesday, one of those days when nothing special happens and you think it's going to be just like all the others. It was like 12:30, lunchtime, and I was at my desk eating a sandwich I'd brought from home when I decided to call Stephanie just to ask her how her day was going. You know, those normal couple calls where you don't talk about anything important but they make you feel connected. She answered quickly, like on the second ring, and she sounded a bit flustered. She said, "Hi, honey," quickly, and then, "Wait a second," and I heard like background noise, people talking, plates, that kind of restaurant atmosphere. I asked her where she was, and she told me at home that she just had the TV on. And I thought, well, maybe it is the TV, although it sounded weird. Then she told me she'd call me back because she was busy with something, and she hung up, or at least tried to hang up, because what she didn't know is that the phone didn't actually disconnect, like those technical glitches that sometimes happen, and I was still on the line hearing everything. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. I just heard muffled voices, and I was about to hang up myself when I started to clearly distinguish Stephanie's voice. She was talking to someone, a man, and the tone was completely different from the one she used with me. It was playful, flirty, like that voice you use when you're hitting on someone. My stomach dropped to the floor immediately. I don't know how to explain it. It was like my whole body knew what was happening before my brain processed it. The guy was saying something about how good she looked, and she was laughing in that way, you know, that fake but sexy laugh that people use when they're flirting. And I just sat there with the phone stuck to my ear, unable to move. Garrett, my coworker, asked me if I was okay because apparently I turned pale, but I just raised my hand like, "Give me a minute," and kept listening. The conversation continued and every word was like a dagger. They were talking about how difficult it was to see each other, that she missed being with him, and the guy, who I later found out was named Austin, was telling her he wished things were different, that he wished she wasn't in that complicated situation with her husband. And that's when my brain clicked. You know what I mean? My wife wasn't just cheating on me, but she had also told this guy some version of our life that clearly wasn't real. She probably told him I was horrible, or that we were separating, or who knows what lie. I kept listening, recording everything on my phone because something in my IT mind told me I was going to need proof of this. And the call lasted like 7 minutes total. Almost an hour of listening to my wife, basically planning her life with another guy, while I paid all her bills. When they finally said goodbye, like she gave him one of those kisses you can hear over the phone, and told him she'd see him soon. I just sat in my cubicle shaking, literally shaking with rage and shock at the same time. Garrett came over and asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't even speak at first. I just showed him the phone and told him my wife was cheating on me, and I had just heard everything. He took me to one of the empty conference rooms and let me process everything, brought me water. He was a good friend, honestly. After like 20 minutes of being there trying to breathe and thinking about what to do, I decided I wasn't going to confront her by phone or wait to get home. No, sir. I was going to go directly to where she was and surprise her with her lover, because basically I had heard enough of the conversation to know they were at a bistro like 15 minutes from my office. One of those kind of fancy places where they serve brunch all day. I told Garrett to cover for me with the boss, that I had a family emergency, which technically was true, I guess, and I left the office at like 1:30 in the afternoon. I drove to the bistro with my hands gripping the steering wheel, playing the recording again in the car to make sure I hadn't hallucinated everything. And every time I heard her voice laughing with that guy, I felt more like crashing the car into something. But obviously I didn't. I got to the restaurant, parked the car on the street, and went in trying to stay calm even though inside I was dying. The place was exactly like I had imagined. Tables with white tablecloths, natural light coming through big windows, that kind of place where people go to have dates or business meetings, and there they were, sitting at a table near the window. Stephanie had her back to the entrance so she didn't see me coming, but the guy, Austin, saw me when I approached, and the expression on his face changed immediately, like he knew something bad was about to happen. She must have noticed his expression because she turned around, and when she saw me, her face went through like 5 different emotions in 2 seconds: surprise, fear, confusion, and then she tried to put on a "what are you doing here" kind of casual face. I got to the table and just said, "So, this is what you do when you say you're at home looking for work?" And she tried to speak, but I took out my phone and played the recording right there on the table for both of them to hear. Austin turned completely pale, like the man literally lost all the color from his face, and started saying, "Wait, wait, wait. What is this?" The recording started playing, and you could clearly hear everything: the laughter, the flirting, her telling him she missed him talking about when they could be together without complications, and I just stood there watching both of them. Stephanie tried to grab the phone, but I pulled it away. And I told Austin, "She told you we were separated, right? Or that I was a bad guy? Because let me tell you, we're married. We live together. And I pay every cent of her life, while she apparently spends her days with you." The guy got up from the table immediately and said to Stephanie, "You told me you were in the process of getting divorced. You told me you slept in separate rooms." And she tried to say something, but he was already pulling out his wallet and throwing money on the table. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. She lied to me, too." And I believed him because his shocked face seemed genuine. Stephanie started with the classic tactics. First, she tried crying, instant tears and everything, saying we could fix it, that it had been a mistake, that she loved me. Then when she saw that wasn't working, she switched to angry mode, telling me I was never home, that I made her feel lonely, that it was basically my fault she looked for attention elsewhere. Can you believe it? The woman cheats on me for who knows how long, and it's my fault for working to support her. People in the restaurant were already looking at us. The waiter. I came over kind of nervous, asking if everything was okay, and I told him, yes, that we were leaving. Stephanie tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away, told her to go home if she wanted, or to go with Austin if he still wanted her, now that he knew the truth, and I left the restaurant. I sat in the car for like 10 minutes trying to decide what to do, and the first thing I did was call the bank. We had joint accounts, obviously, because I trusted her like an idiot, and I had also given her a supplementary credit card from my account. I called and canceled her access to everything immediately. Explained to the representative that we were in the process of separating and I needed to protect my finances, and they did it without a problem. Then I called the phone company and took her line off my family plan, basically cut off everything I could cut off in that moment. I guess it was my rational side taking control, because I knew that if I didn't do it quickly, she was going to try to take out all the money or do some crazy thing. I drove back to the office but didn't go in, just stayed in the parking lot calling divorce lawyers. I found one who could see me the next day, a guy named Richard who had good reviews online and specialized in cases where there was infidelity involved. Then I called Keith, a friend of mine from college who lived alone in an apartment on the other side of town, and I explained the situation to him. He told me to come to his place whenever I wanted, that he had a sofa bed and I could stay as long as I needed, and honestly, that gesture made me feel a little better in the middle of all the disaster. I decided I had to go back to the apartment to get my essential stuff: clothes, personal laptop, important documents, that kind of thing, because I didn't want to have to deal with Stephanie later. I got to the apartment at like 5 in the afternoon. She was already there, and when I walked in, she immediately started with the drama. First, she tried to hug me, then she cried again, then she got angry again. It was like a cycle of emotions she was clearly using to manipulate me. I ignored everything and went straight to our room, pulled out a suitcase and started putting clothes in. She followed me around the apartment saying I couldn't do this, that we had to talk, that she was going to change, and I just kept packing without saying anything. At one point, she grabbed my arm, trying to make me look at her, and I pulled away like firm, but without hurting her. Told her not to touch me, that this was over and that my lawyer was going to contact her. That made her explode completely. She started screaming that I was selfish, that I was abandoning her, that she didn't have a job or money and how was she supposed to survive. And I told her maybe Austin could help her, or maybe she could get the job she'd supposedly been looking for years. I finished packing the basics, grabbed my laptop, some documents from the safe we had, basically my birth certificate, our marriage certificate that I was going to need for the divorce, that kind of important stuff, and left the apartment. Stephanie followed me to the hallway screaming, but I got on the elevator and the doors closed with her still screaming. I drove to Keith's place feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and some relief too, like it was horrible to be going through this, but at the same time I felt like a weight had been lifted off me. You know what I mean? Like I had finally seen the reality I had been avoiding seeing for a long time. Keith received me with beers and pizza, good friend honestly, and let me vent for hours. I told him everything, showed him the recording, and he was like shocked. Told me Stephanie had always seemed kind of fake to him, but that he never imagined she was capable of something like that. That night I barely slept, basically stayed awake on the sofa bed checking my finances, calculating how much the divorce was going to cost, thinking about how everything was going to be divided. I was afraid she would try to keep half my stuff, or worse, that she'd make up some crazy story to make me look bad, but the recording gave me some peace of mind because it was clear evidence of her infidelity. The next day I went to see the lawyer, Richard, and explained the whole situation to him in detail. I showed him the recording and he told me that was pure gold in legal terms, that documented infidelity was going to help me a lot in the divorce process. We started the paperwork immediately. He explained that since we didn't have kids, things would be simpler, but that it was still going to take a few months because that's how the system worked. I asked him about the apartment, and he told me that since the lease was only in my name, I had the right to keep it, but that if I wanted, I could just leave and let her stay there until the lease expired. Which seemed better to me because honestly, I didn't want to live in that place ever again. It had too many bad memories already. The next few days were chaotic. Stephanie started calling all our acquaintances, telling them her version of the story, saying I had abandoned her for no reason, that I was cruel and cold, basically painting me as the villain. Some people believed her, especially her girlfriends who I'd never liked anyway. But most of my friends supported me when I told them the truth and showed them the proof. She tried to call me like 50 times a day, sent me long text messages alternating between begging me to come back and insulting me, telling me I was trash. I eventually blocked her number because I couldn't deal with that. My lawyer told me all communication had to be through him anyway. Like a week later, I got the news that Stephanie had completely emptied our joint savings account, withdrew like $3,000 we had there for emergencies. My lawyer told me that wasn't legally okay and we were going to use it in the case, but it still made me angry, because that money was basically all mine. I had saved it with my salary. I also found out from the apartment owner that she had thrown all my remaining stuff off the balcony onto the street, like clothes, books, some small furniture that was mine, everything destroyed, obviously. I had to go with the police to file a report, because my lawyer said that was destruction of property and we could add it to the case. When I got to the building with the police officers, the security manager showed me the camera recordings where you could clearly see Stephanie throwing all my stuff off the third-floor balcony. She had called the police earlier saying I had gone to the apartment and assaulted her, but the cameras showed I hadn't been there in days, so basically she got herself in trouble for making a false report. The officers went to talk to her and she came out of the apartment playing the victim, crying and saying she was scared, but when they showed her the recordings of her throwing my stuff, she went quiet. They didn't arrest her but gave her a serious warning about making false reports, and I felt a little better knowing the building had everything documented in case she tried more crazy stuff. What I didn't expect was for Austin, the guy Stephanie was cheating on me with, to contact me like 2 weeks after all the initial drama. He sent me a message on Facebook saying he needed to talk to me, and I honestly thought about ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe, and the guy showed up looking super uncomfortable, sat down and told me he wanted to apologize properly and explain his side of the story. Basically, he told me that Stephanie had told him from the beginning that we were separated, that I was emotionally abusive, that she was trying to save money to leave the apartment, but that I controlled all the finances. A whole elaborate story that made him look like the hero who was rescuing her from a bad situation. Austin showed me text messages between him and Stephanie where she clearly maintained that lie. There were photos of them together in places I recognized. Restaurants, parks, even a hotel like 2 hours from the city where they apparently spent a whole weekend. He told me that when he found out the truth that day at the bistro, he felt used and furious, that he would never have gotten involved with a married woman if he had known the reality. I believed him because he really seemed affected by everything. And besides, he offered to give me copies of all the messages and photos for my lawyer to use in the divorce. Said he wanted Stephanie to pay for lying to both of us. I accepted his offer because more evidence was better. And honestly, the guy ended up being okay. It was weird, but I felt like we had both been victims of Stephanie's lies in a way. The divorce process moved faster than I expected, thanks to all the evidence we had. Richard, my lawyer, presented the recording, Austin's messages, the photos, the police report about my destroyed stuff, basically built a solid case that showed not only infidelity, but also destructive behavior and compulsive lying. Stephanie hired a lawyer too. Obviously, I don't know with what money, but I guess someone was helping her. Maybe her parents or something. Her lawyer tried to argue that she deserved spousal support because she had been out of the job market during our marriage and needed time to stabilize. But my lawyer countered with the fact that she had been out of the job market by her own choice, not because I had prevented her, and that besides, she had been using that time to have an extramarital relationship instead of looking for work like she said. There were some back and forth negotiations, like her lawyer asking for ridiculous amounts of money and my lawyer rejecting them, but eventually we reached an agreement. I kept my car, my personal stuff obviously, and most of our shared things because she really hadn't contributed, financially, to almost anything. She kept her own car that I had helped pay for, but well, whatever, and received a small amount of money as a final settlement, so she would sign the papers without fighting more. Like $5,000 that my lawyer told me was worth paying just to finish everything quickly. I left the apartment, told the owner I wasn't going to renew the lease when it expired in 3 months, and that if Stephanie wanted to stay, she would have to make her own contract with him, which I don't think she could do without provable income, but that wasn't my problem anymore. The whole process from that day at the bistro until we signed the final divorce papers took like 4.5 months, faster than normal, according to Richard, because Stephanie eventually got tired of fighting when she saw she wasn't going to get much more. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a strange peace, like it was official. I wasn't married to her anymore. I didn't have to worry about her lies or her drama or her manipulation anymore. Garrett and Keith took me to a bar that night to celebrate my freedom. We had some beers and toasted to new beginnings, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. Now, like 4 months after all that, I'm living in my own apartment. A smaller one, but it's totally mine. I work at the same place and things are good. I've been on some casual dates, but nothing serious yet. Honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to completely trust someone again after everything that happened. Stephanie tried to contact me like a month ago through a new number I didn't have blocked. Sent me a long message saying she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, that she wanted us to talk, but I simply ignored it and blocked that number too. I have nothing to say to her. She made her choices and I made mine. And my choice was to completely distance myself from that toxic situation and rebuild my life without her. I still think about that day sometimes. That random Tuesday when I called just to say hi and ended up discovering my marriage was a lie. And it makes me angry, but I'm also grateful it happened when it did. Because who knows how much longer she would have kept cheating on me if that phone hadn't failed to hang up. I guess sometimes things happen for a reason, and my reason was to get out of a relationship that was consuming me without me realizing it. Now I'm better, definitely better, and that's what matters at the end of the day.